Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, and together with my co-host Mark Vronich of jbiztechvalley.com and statewide news service.
Well, Rabbi, we have a really special, I'm really excited about this show, and I don't get excited about all our shows, but we have Congressman Chris Gibson with us. So welcome to the show again. You've been here before, and it's so great to see you come back here, and you had a hard-fought election, so congratulations on trouncing your opponent.
Well, hey, thanks, Mark. Rabbi, great to be with you both. Thanks for having me back, and happy Hanukkah.
See, Jewish View, then I have to say Mazel Tov. He says congratulations. The Rabbi's got to say Mazel Tov.
Well, thank you, and happy Hanukkah to everyone out there today, too. Thank you.
Okay.
Liza, what is this? How many terms have you won now?
Well, that's the third term.
All right, excellent. So you get a little seniority in the House?
Mm-hmm.
And the House is all Republican, so...
Not all Republican,
not
but...
all.
Well, it's majority Republican.
Right, it's true.
And going into the next session, so what do you think your priorities will be?
Well, two things. One is we have some national programs I think we should be advancing. Tax reform. We've got a code that's complex. It's anti-growth. And certainly it's been since 1986 that we've reformed it. I believe that it's absolutely well past time that we do so. I believe there is a bipartisan consensus to do that. We need to work on details that we can all support. So tax reform should be very high on the agenda because, look, we saw this in the 80s when we had a Democratic Congress and a Republican president. Divided government, they implemented tax reform. It closed loopholes. It lowered rates. We grew. That helped hardworking Americans. We saw wages rising. We saw jobs created, and we saw revenues come into the coffer, which helped as well. So that should be a major priority. Immigration reform, we need to get that done. Secure our borders, fix our broken system, and a surface transportation bill.
That's not going to be bipartisan, though. I mean, I know.
Ultimately, it will be. Has to be by definition, right? Because you got a Republican Congress and a Democratic president.
So you got to work together.
You got to work together. You got to work together, and I believe we can. It's often. There's a lot of media coverage that talks about the differences with regard to some of the specifics with immigration reform, but I think there's enough consensus on things we can do together. Secure our borders, work on interior enforcement as well, visa reform, ag worker program, and ultimately have a program to deal with the 11 million people who are here, because you're not going to send them back. We need a program that reconciles the fact that we are at once. We're a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants.
And people think that...
we can do this.
People think that the immigration problem is a Texas or a southwestern problem, but it really isn't. It's also a New York State problem.
Absolutely, Mark, because you talk to our farmers, for example, and it's a major issue for them, access to reliable workforce, stable workforce, and we have issues getting folks to work on these farms. It's in other industries as well. So, the issue is, how do you put together a program that reconciles the fact that we are at once, we're a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants? It seems to me that the reasonable ground that we can get on is you have a program where individuals who are here outside the law now come forward, they plead guilty for having broken our laws. That's documented. It's not a felony.
No,
but
it gets an
but it is
ACLD. If you don't do it again,
right,
then it gets dismissed.
So it is documented.
Right.
If somebody comes forward, they admit that they broke our law, they pay a fine. In some cases, for workers that are in a tough spot, that means that they have to face garnishment. They'll have to pay it back over a period of time, but that's part of the consequences, the penalty, and a background check to make sure that individual's not in a gang or selling drugs, and some say learn English. You put that together, and if somebody comes forward and goes through that program, pleading guilty, paying the fine, going through the background check, learning English, then they get earned legal status. And in this way, we can reconcile the fact that we're a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants, and it can go with the other parts of reform that are so important to our economy. Mm-hmm. So tax reform, immigration reform, and then another surface transportation bill. This is also really important to upstate New York.
Public transportation?
Absolutely. We have over 7,000.
When you say surface transportation, you mean public transportation?
No.
Or do you mean roads and bridges?
Roads and bridges.
Okay.
It's called surface transportation in Washington. It's also called an infrastructure bill.
Right.
Basically, we've got over 7,000 bridges in our state that need work. And look, this is important to our confidence. It's of our infrastructure. It's also important to growth You talk about a business that's thinking about moving here. They want to be able to move, convey their goods. We need to have world-class infrastructure. So this is important too. And not only that, the contractors, the building trades professionals that work on these projects, great folks, and this is important for their livelihood too as we work to improve the economy. So those are three big issues there. I want to say some local issues too.
Well, I just want to bring up a point. Shouldn't the federal government take care of the bridges on federal highways, on interstates, and then let the state take care of the bridges on the state highways? Are you talking about the federal government giving money to the states?
Well, the way this
to
works
help their
is
bridges on the state roads?
So what we do is, we enact
Yes.
a transportation bill, surface transportation bill. The appropriations money is sent to the states, and the states generally pool the Fed money with the state money, and they'll come forward with their plan. But the general concept is one where the federal government is expected to provide monies for the federal roads.
Not for the state roads.
Well, in some cases it does extend,
It does
and it can go
extend,
into
yeah.
a state pot of money that's meant to be an infrastructure. But the federal responsibility is
Where's the accountability?
Is the federal roads.
Who does the audit? Who does the accountability that these monies are being spent?
It's internal to this system. No, there's definitely audit.
Okay.
In fact, if anything, quite frankly, there's a feeling there's too much bureaucratic red tape that goes with this. In fact, we've spent some time really condensing the process. It needs to be accountable, no question on that. But we also want it to get done.
Yeah.
So we have to have a streamlined process. That's part of what we did in this MAP 21 legislation that brought forward monies for transportation. In addition to those three major areas, I want to mention some local initiatives that are very important. Broadband expansion. I have 11 counties, 165 towns, and actually over 1,000 village hamlets and towns. And for a lot of my area, access to high-speed broadband is very important for job creation. It's important for education. It's important for healthcare delivery and quality of life.
What are you talking, so what exactly would the legislation encounter? What would be?
Two programs.
Cell phones, or are you talking?
Well, no, telecoms, yes, that's part of the issue here too, is the broader telecoms issue. But I was explicitly here talking about broadband expansion, your access to the internet, so you can advertise, that you can take through PayPal or other means.
Because if you're in the
commerce
hill
over
towns or just far away from major population centers, then they can't get the internet.
Well, in some cases that's true. That's the issue here. We have some areas that actually do quite well with access to high-speed broadband, and other areas, mostly in the rural areas, that don't. So what we need is a proliferation of deployment.
I think you're
broadband.
saying you need a stent put in to expand the broadband so that more information can flow through.
So-
I'm just trying to
that's
get
basically
it down
it.
to,
And-
because there's, while there's some areas that don't have any internet, there's some areas that only get a little bit to flow through, and then there's others that have the broadband, which is the maximum.
Well,
And
we're also
so
definitions here, right? Because dial-up, for example, that doesn't work for commerce. And in some of your access over like copper wire, that may not make the definition of how fast it needs to move, both in terms of receiving and sending, and in terms of how much that your file can contain before it can move over the internet. So it's both an expansion of capacity, but also it's an improvement of the capacity that's already existing. So this is very important for job creation. Think about how much telecommuting now that we see that we didn't see 10, 15 years ago. We're talking about commerce that was in New York City, for example, and now you have the ability to be up here. You can telecommute. You can advertise your goods and services online. People can actually purchase sometimes your products. They can purchase it online, and it can be shipped. So,
well, you know about that. You got the menorah for your car via online, right? You got it.
No, they actually say, I think there's more, because now it's the season when spending is, and people are buying so much, I think online is even more.
They have
than
Cyber
regular
Monday now.
stores.
They have Cyber Monday.
So this is important not only for
That's
consumerism.
interesting. I never thought of it that
It's
way.
important not only for consumerism, which is, of course, supports all of us, the 320 million Americans, but it's important for commerce, for our entrepreneurs, because, to the extent that we proliferate broadband, we can actually have creative folks that move up here into our rural areas,
Right.
and they can still continue to thrive in the business space. So that's why, and we have 2 federal programs that help with the broadband expansion. One's in the Farm Bill, and I sort of call it the ground game because we get 2 or 3 yards in a cloud of dust. We still do it. We run with the ball here. We move it, but we don't get the big expansion. We help some of the small villages and towns with this. And then there's another program called the Connect America Fund. The Connect America Fund actually comes under the FCC. And my frustration with that program is in the first round, the rules were such that they were only allowing these contracts to the big companies. The problem with the big companies is that if it's not highly profitable for them, they don't do it. So I've been trying to work to get the administration to change the rules to allow our small family-owned telecoms to get access to this. And we have 2 co-ops in our district too. We have the Delaware County Electrical Co-op and the Otsego County Electrical Co-op. You let these family-owned businesses, these small telecoms, and these co-ops get at it to the same funding, which is $4.5 billion in that fund, they'll build out. That's the big move we want to continue to do.
So that's one, and what's the?
Lyme disease.
Lyme
We're
disease.
still working on another local issue. Look, we got more to do on that. I'm hoping that the governor will sign the New York State law that passed unanimously here, and I've got a bill that passed in the U.S. House that organizes the federal government to better respond to the public health scourge of Lyme. I mean, the issue we're having is the Centers for Disease Control so narrowly defines Lyme that we don't have proper protocols to diagnose and to treat, and then ultimately, because of the narrow definitions to Lyme, the insurance companies very rarely cover beyond the 21, 28 days of doxycycline. I mean, they don't cover the treatment, and we have individuals who have been suffering from chronic Lyme for a long period of time, and none of that's covered. So this bill is important because we organize the federal government in a different manner. We bring forward diverse scientific viewpoints. We think when that information is published, it will impact the CDC's guidelines. When you change the guidelines, you change the treatment protocols, and ultimately the insurance company.
And what's
covers.
the third one?
We're working mitigation. Flood mitigation is still an ongoing issue.
That
Still an ongoing issue.
Schoharie County is very. I mean, the stream beds are
Absolutely. Schoharie,
need
in fact,
to be redeveloped.
What would you do, dig deeper the creeks?
No, I mean,
How
it's
do
a
you
mixture
do
of
that?
things. It's a fair question, but the approach that we're taking is actually what is some describe as the Colorado approach, which is because there's some on the extreme. Some want to do all digging, and some want to do all floodplains. Well, what the science points to is it's somewhere in between.
Right.
Where you don't have populations, it's good to let Mother Nature breathe. Why? Because if all you do is maintenance, what you do is when you dig and you straighten, you make the stream more powerful so that when it actually hits something downstream, maybe 100 miles downstream, it totally takes out the community. Whereas if you allow it to breathe, if you allow a floodplain in places where there aren't people living, and then like say Prattsville, when you get to a place where there are people living, that's when you need to do maintenance. Maintenance means in some cases shoring up the stream bed and doing some silt removal and stuff, and in other cases it means a levee. So you need to do a mixture of things, but the bottom line is this: we're getting hit with more storms, and they're increasingly more powerful and potent and volatile. So we've got to recognize that. We have changing weather patterns, and part of what we have to do is we have to deal with that, and that means preparing to protect people and property. So those are 3 big national issues and 3 local issues, and we've got others too. I'm working on rolling back Common Core. We're fighting for our veterans. I've got a bill on Agent Orange that we're trying to get
Well,
into
they're
law.
from Vietnam.
Yeah.
They haven't used that since Vietnam, did they?
Well, I mean, the issue is I have got Vietnam veterans that are still suffering.
Yeah.
They've been exposed to Agent Orange, and now look, if you served on the ground, you're covered. But if you served just offshore in the
40 years later, they're still suffering.
and many of them have died, quite
Yeah.
frankly, for exposure to Agent Orange. So it's the sailors that serve just offshore. They're the ones that are not. They don't have presumed coverage, and I've got a bill that changes that. We've been fighting for
Very
that.
good.
So
So since you're on the military idea here, what about Henry Johnson? I mean,
Yeah.
the president signed it into law, and are you going to be? I mean, I haven't seen you involved in this. This was a Chuck Schumer thing. His staff found the documentation, but you're the military guy, and you should be right behind him. With
Well, I'm proud of his service, courageous battlefield performance, and will now have the Medal of Honor And
Are you going to be involved with
I haven't seen
presenting
any.
it?
I haven't seen any of the details on when the ceremony is, but I'm certainly very proud
I think you should
of
be
his
there.
services. Yeah. Well, certainly.
I think you should be there. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that it shouldn't just be the Schumer Tonko show. It's, you know, you really should be more involved.
Well,
in
I hope
this.
that I'm available that day because I certainly would love to convey my deep respect and admiration to the family
You know.
for the performance, and certainly I think this was long overdue.
Well, once we're talking about the military, of course, we're on the Jewish View, so it's dear to our hearts, Israel, the state of Israel. I know you're a big supporter of Israel, but a lot of times the military, selling them planes, or, you know, from my point of view, listen, I'm an American and I care about America, number one, but still Israel, just from an American point of view, is our best ally there. You see Egypt goes up and goes down, Syria, you never know who you're playing with in some of these countries. Iraq, we're friends with them, they're our enemies, you never know what's happening.
Well,
But Israel's a true friend.
absolutely. And, for me, this is very personal. Young man, 26 years old at the time. I was in the Gulf War. And, a lot of uncertainty there. We were fighting the fourth largest military in the world. Now, we know now, looking back, well, it wasn't, as hard as we thought it would be, but that's not what you thought trust me, when we were there, we trained really hard. We were prepared to go up what they called Iraqi triangles. We expected these guys to throw all kinds of weapons of mass destruction at us and have machine guns, tanks, all kinds of combined arms. And, while all this was going on, Iraq was hurling Scuds at Israel, and at the time, you remember, the USSR was still an entity. The USSR didn't crumble until the end of '91. So, the possibility of a global war, certainly a regional and potentially a global war, was real. So, we asked Israel at the time to do something that no country really has the right to ask another country. We asked them not to respond, because of the fear that, the coalition, because if you think about our coalition, on our flank, I was in the 82nd Airborne Division at the time, the 18th Airborne Corps, on our flank was Syrian tanks, if you can imagine that, and armored personnel carriers. So, there were Arabs that were fighting alongside of us as we were going up against Saddam Hussein's forces. So, Hussein was desperate, and he was trying to break up that coalition, so he fired Scuds at Israel, and of course, Israel has the most formidable military force there, and we asked them not to respond, and they honored that request.
Well, now they can.
We should never forget that. No. That's a friend that you always need to stand. I'll never forget that. We always need to stand with our friend. We share values with Israel. This is a dear friend of the United States, and so in this latest bills, we have $3.1 billion annual of aid for Israel. This is very important. We do collaborative programs together, Iron Dome, Arrow, David Sling. We do a series of these programs that we develop together, and it's for missile defense and for rockets, and it helps Israel's defense, and quite frankly, it's good for us too.
That's what I
We
say.
benefit enormously and economically.
You visited Israel?
I've not been to Israel yet. I'm looking forward to
then
going.
we have to go
Well,
with you.
Yeah,
doesn't
looking
Paul
forward to-
Tonko say he wasn't there either?
Yeah,
We can
Paul.
make it a bipartisan
Yeah.
trip, and you'll take
Yeah.
us along. We'll bring the cameras, and it'll
Right.
be wonderful.
Good coverage.
That's it.
Yeah, but
but
it's-
I haven't been to Israel either, so.
Yeah, but it's very important that we stand with Israel, and in part that means this material support, but it also means the spiritual, and just standing with an ally and a strong friend.
Let me ask
Yeah,
you,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, a quick question about the congressional calendar. I think you're meeting for 150 days or something. Are you comfortable with the amount of days that, when the calendar came out, that you're
Well, the important thing is what we do with it.
Well, I understand, but
Yeah.
your constituents look at it as they have to go to work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, regardless of what they do with it.
Well, I'll assure you this.
I know for a fact that I know personally that it's not just what you do in
Oh,
Congress, it's what you do in the home front and in the district. So, and you have, like you said, 11 counties. You have a large district.
Right.
So I understand that you're not just sitting around twiddling your thumbs when you're not in Congress. But I just
Yeah.
wanted to know if you were comfortable
Well,
with those number of
yeah.
days that you have to pass laws, to be in committees,
Well, the important thing is that we get our work done. If we're
Yeah.
getting our work done, then that's so. It's not the. Let me just give you an example. Last year, the entire year, 365 days. I had 9 days off, counting Christmas and Thanksgiving. So when I'm not in Washington, I'm all over my district.
That's right.
And that's how I'm.
That's difficult. I
No,
mean,
and I
you're
know
That's
such
how
a
that
big
for a fact.
area.
I know
so
that for a
with regard
fact,
to the
yeah.
Washington,
Right.
again, what matters is what we do with our time. You know, if we're doing, you know, important hearings and passing in, like tax reform, immigration reform, surface transportation, getting our national defense, working on these other issues. So it's a question of what we do with our
I
time.
remember when Nancy Pelosi was the speaker, she had
About the same amount of days.
she had about the same amount of
Oh,
days
yeah.
because she had members stay like for 5 days in
Yeah,
a row.
it's about the
and,
same amount
And
of
the
time.
the Thursday, Friday part was really difficult for many congressmen, especially those in Alaska and Hawaii and out west. But you know, they wanted to be home in their district, and they also have large territories to cover.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, you know, it seems like you're there more days. You're going to be in session more days than you were this past year.
I guess that's true.
A few days more. So
Yeah.
I was trying to
Oh.
see if there was.
Well, I mean, I look at it less in terms of the number of days,
Yeah.
in terms of what we actually get done.
Okay.
And what I also think it's important is, though, that we do spend time listening, moving all about the district. It's so valuable. I can
Right.
tell you that I felt like you mentioned at the outset of the show, you know, that we won by 30 points. That's in part because I really feel like I've got the pulse of the
Yes.
district from having been to the over 1,000 village and hamilton towns and heard what they had to say and try to find ways, as I mentioned, the legislation, that's constituent-driven legislation. Those are ideas that came from our people.
Now you run every 2 years, so are you planning on running again? I mean, it's like.
Well, I've said the most I'll serve in Congress is 8 years. I've said that. I've term limited myself. So at the end of this, it would be the end of 6.
Right.
So by my pledge, I could run one more time.
Right, you would run one more time
But
and
do you
hopefully
think
be successful.
Why do you pick 8 years? On the other hand, I was thinking that you are so popular and you're going to get such good seniority. I mean, you can be very powerful in the Congress, and
Well,
we
Rabbi,
need someone powerful.
I feel
there.
strongly about rotation of office, as it was called at the founding. I feel strongly about that it's important not to have a political class. So I want to lead by example. Just like when my wife and I give our pension back to the taxpayer because we're in a tough time making hard decisions, and I want the American people and my people to know that I'm leading by example. These tough decisions I have to make, our family, we've given back. I think now we're past what our total net worth. I've only been into Congress 4 years. We've given back to the taxpayer more than our net worth because I write back my pension back to the Treasury every month. And the same thing with term limits. I feel like to lead by example here, I wanted to self-impose term limits, and I do think that there's just incredible folks all over the Hudson Valley, the Catskill Mountain region, Capital District, and the central New York part of my district that we're going to be good.
Well, after 8 years, I hope you continue helping the people because
Well,
I think you're a good man over in
and-
some other capacity.
This begs the question, which people have speculated about whether you feel that there's a larger role for you in the state, such as maybe running for governor.
Well, one thing, when I was in the Army, when I was a battalion commander, I didn't think, well, how can I be a brigade commander? I just focused on being a battalion
I know,
commander.
but it
Now,
takes
ultimately,
time.
I was a brigade commander,
Right.
but that was because I think I focused on being the best battalion commander I could be.
Are you
best servant.
flattered that people are talking about you to run for governor?
I appreciate that support deeply, and I will tell you this much: I feel very strongly about this. That you talk about Moreland Commission,
Yeah.
you talk about all these indictments and everything like that, and you can look at this isolated, but the history of mankind is that absolute power corrupts, and the fact that my party is not able to compete statewide is, in my view, the proximate cause. We have to be a viable alternative.
Well, it was the funding. I mean, the financing. He couldn't. I mean, he had Republican county executives. Bob Astorino, who ran against the governor, had Republican county executives supporting the governor.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of crossover where Republicans were not supporting their own party leader, standard bearer. So I think that was one problem. And then the rub was people never thought Astorino had a chance. so they weren't giving money, and just to...
He didn't lose by, what did he lose by, 12?
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
He got 43% of the vote.
Is it that high? I knew it was
Yeah.
in the low 40s.
Yeah, it was 43%.
But
so
here's what I think we need to do going forward, and this I am going to be involved with because I want to be a team player and help. Because I think, by the way, it's not partisan why I'm doing it.
I know.
I firmly believe this, that when you have a viable two-party system, that's the best way to combat corruption. Because when you constantly have to be on the best part of your game, that's what brings out the best in people. When you have absolute power, like we're having issues here, we haven't won statewide, our party, in 12 years. I'll just tell you, look at the history of our country, look at the history of mankind. Whenever you see one party, one person controlling, you're going to find corruption. We've got to do better. So what do we do? Well, what we've got to do is get just a bench of folks. We need to get a bunch of folks involved in a series of conferences, town hall meetings, fora across the state, displaying, showcasing our ideas that solve problems, growth in the economy, rising wages, right? Dealing with education reform that empowers, freedom issues that address, for us, like the SAFE Act and stuff like that. When we're moving all across the state, talking about solutions to problems, connecting with voters, here's what we're doing. We're raising the name recognition of a slate of folks, whoever it may be.
And the brand.
In the brand,
That's
for sure.
what you got to look at. So
You're right.
anyway, we're running out of time. So I got to get 2 topics in, and it's going to be quick.
But I'm not
sorry.
quite done. I got to say
I know.
one thing.
Okay, go ahead.
So,
go ahead.
the important thing is when I look at what happened to Rob.
Yes.
I mean, look, we were post Labor Day, and half the voters in New York didn't know who Rob was.
Right.
And so when you're facing an opponent that has tens of millions of dollars, that opponent gets to define.
Yes.
So what happened to Rob is,
He was defined by the governor.
So what we have to do in the next 2 years
Yeah.
is, get our folks out, talk about our solutions, helps our brand, but then it gets whoever it is. If it's going to be Rob again, then we need to get Rob's favorability, unfavorability ratings in the next 2 years.
Right.
We need to get them positive, because right now he was upside down.
Right.
So if Rob's going to be our candidate, we've got to work hard to really reintroduce him to the state so that he's in a strong position, because we have to assume this: we're going to get outspent in 2018. So we've got to have a candidate, whoever it is,
Yeah.
it's got to be known and in a strong position
Right.
going forward. So we can do this by earned media events, we can do it by social media, we can do it by grassroots and connecting with emails, and that I am going to be involved with. I'm
Okay.
going to be involved helping our team.
Okay. So
2 fast questions.
aside from not being the party chairman, which is his responsibility to do what you just said, but anyway, casinos in your district, Sullivan County, yes, and
Schenectady?
well, Schenectady's not in your district; it's
Right.
Tonko's, but Rensselaer, no, and Schoharie County, no, on the casinos.
So you got 1 out of 4.
are you sort of? You must be jumping for joy, but then sorry
Well-
for these other areas.
Well, that's basically right. And I must tell you that what sold me on these concepts was really the approach. You go to Sullivan County and Southern Ulster, which made competitive bids, and this is the area where they have a history
Yes.
of resorts with
Destination. place,
destination.
yes.
Families would come.
Maybe you could tell them to put a kosher restaurant in that Sullivan County.
Well, you know
resort.
that.
No,
Yes, the Borscht Belt.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Maybe
So
they should revive it. Maybe
So
they-
this is the whole point, though. When I looked at the concepts, it wasn't like they briefed me on a casino.
No.
They briefed me on a family resort. That
Really?
fine dining, horseback riding, golf, movies, yes, a casino, day trips out for historical sites and
It's
environmental.
interesting. See, I didn't know that. I just
Oh,
think
yeah.
of a casino.
No.
They say casino,
No,
and I
it's-
say, well, it's corrupt. I mean, I don't like it. I mean, I know it's legal. I don't mean
Yeah.
illegal.
No, Rabbi, I'll tell you, this is the thing. When I was briefed on this, because, I mean, I'm concerned about
Yeah, sure,
a
it's
lot
your
of things
area.
and probably sympathetic to some of the thoughts that you would have. I'm sure we'd probably share some of the same concerns. But the concept that I was briefed on invoked, sort of emotions that here's what we're going for. Like, for example, the concept from the Sullivan Family Resort. They're going to try to attract families to come,
Right.
where the kids can go to water sports. I think there's going to be a Wolf Lodge, right? All the family can go. During the day, maybe the father or the mother wants to go play golf, and the other one may want to go horseback riding
Well,
in the evening.
Yeah, they're going to restore the Concord Golf Course, which was famous.
Absolutely,
Yes,
they are.
but-
So, and then maybe they'll use the casino for a period of time. But here's the point: you think about what it's like after you maybe go hiking or do 18 holes of golf. You know what that first sip of a beer tastes like?
Yeah.
Isn't it better than it really is when after you
Right.
play golf for 18 holes?
Right.
So here's the point I've said to our local distilleries and breweries and to our growers, our specialty crop growers, is we want them to win these contracts to serve in this family resort, because you think about when that family goes through this experience and then they go back home 6 months later, right? And they're like, man, life's tough. We're working hard, but you know what? In 6 months, we get to go back
Yeah.
to Sullivan County. Remember how good that beer was?
Right.
Remember how good that food was? Because this is what helps the local economy, is when they have an emotional attachment, when they have an emotional experience. And so, that's what we really
So
want
the
to
Sullivan part was in a different region that they broke up. That
Right.
was the Hudson Valley and area. And now in the Capital District, your two counties lost out, but some neighboring, is Schenectady going to still help people in your district?
Well, I think that they would. Yes, I mean, I had a bid in from Schoharie, great folks there, and in Rensselaer County as well.
Right. I was rooting for Rensselaer because I like the Hard Rock Cafe, but
Yeah.
You
So
don't need that much pull with the governor. That's
yeah. So I mean, as you point out,
All right, well,
it's
it
a
made
big
me calm
story.
down. I'm glad
No,
you
I
said that, because I think casinos and gambling and low life, those the words come to my mind. But you say it's a family oriented.
Well, that's the whole point. And again, it's very much in line with the history of Sullivan County. Think about,
Sure.
you mentioned the Borch Belt. I mean, they plan on having entertainment there. I mean,
Right,
Jerry
so
Lee
maybe
Lewis,
they'll-
right?
Right, right,
And
right.
Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah.
So that's really the hope for
right,
that.
good.
that's great. Now, hydrofracking quickly, the governor's office said no, a ban. We're not going to have hydrofracking in this state. Today, he said it's not just a continuation of a moratorium, it's no because of the health risks. What's your reaction?
Well, I've always said we need to follow the science.
Right.
So, now we have 2 reports. I plan to read them. But, assuming that, I don't find anything out of line with the science, I think we have to follow the science. If we're not comfortable, now keep in mind, science is always evolving in terms of how to do things. If you think about,
Sure.
think about what happened here when we were dealing with acid rain 15, 20 years ago, and then we brought forward scrubbing, low sulfur, and now we have less of an issue
Yes.
with So, I mean, look, I've always said this, that you look at Vietnam, nobody thought we were poisoning our servicemen and women and the Vietnamese people with Agent Orange, but we were. So now we're dealing with that, right?
Yeah.
And, GE had a permit to
Right.
dump in, they had a legal permit
Permit to dump in
and
Hudson
now-
River.
And now we're cleaning that up. So I didn't want
Yeah.
this to be this generation's issue. So I think we should let science lead the way here.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to going through the report.
All right.
But look,
So we'll check
if the
back with
science
you
points
later.
to,
Okay.
not doing this, at least not at this juncture, because we don't know enough. Because I think, wasn't that one of the reports said that we don't know enough? I
Well,
thought,
that's one, it's a Department of Health report,
Yeah.
which got folded into the Department of Environmental Conservation report.
Yeah.
And they said that, most of the studies were done within the past 2 years, and they were really recent, and there was a lot more that needed to be done in future years. So the fact is that these the past 2 years, the reports that came out were that it is harmful. And the other 35 states that approved hydrofracking never had their health commissioner involved in the process. So there was never a health report on this. So
I want to support the science here. I do need to go through the report.
Okay.
But look, I think that, you're talking about clean air and
Soil.
clean water. And
Yeah.
really, I think we have to be very careful here.
Thank you, Congressman. We're out of time. I think we're over time, really, because there's so many beautiful issues to talk to you about. You're a good congressman for all of us, representative the issues very well. And like Mark says, we'll have to just check in with you
Yeah.
again and get a good report card. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Continue with your
Thank
good work
you.
that you're doing.
Rabbi, thank you.
And
Much
do it
Happy
with
success.
Hanukkah, Mark.
Much
Thank
success.
You.
good
Much
health.
to you, brother.
Good health.
Thank you so much.
Take
And thanks
care.
for the link up with my constituent, too.